Welcome to Inner Compass. I'm Shirley Hoekstra. You can't pick up a newspaper without reading about a conflict that involves religion in a country or a tribe. And we are foolish to think that it doesn't matter and that we don't have to learn about it. Join us today on Inner Compass.
From the campus of Calvin College, this is Inner Compass, exploring how people use faith and ethics to guide them through critical issues of today.
My guest today is Chris Seiple, president of the Institute for Global Engagement in Washington and founder of its Council of Faith and International Affairs, which provides resources, conferences, and publications that inform today's leaders about the role of religion in global issues. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Shirley.
Boy, your institute could not be more timely.
It seems to be that way. We were founded a year before 9/11 at the beginning of the 21st century, and now we seem to embody many of the trends that we find in the 21st century.
Right, because after 9/11, we all woke up and said, what do we know about religion? And people said, what? Not much.
Not much, and it's because we have trouble talking about religion and politics.
Well, and this is because in America, right, separation of church and state, the sort of Enlightenment era, we feel very comfortable about making sure those are separate. But that is hindered us some, hasn't it?
Absolutely. Church and state have been separated in the name of good governance. Amen. But
right.
The casualty often has been analysis. Religion and politics are fundamental to who we are as people and informs our identity and therefore informs how we do things and how we go about our world. And if you look at the field of international relations, which I've been trained, and even just our general public discourse, we don't like to talk about religion because we've been told not to talk about two things in polite company. Assuming you keep polite company, Shirley. And that's religion and politics.
That's right. That's right. Because you think people are going to fight about it, right? You're going to have conflict.
Yeah, but the bummer of it all is our national security and global engagement exist at the intersection of religion and politics.
That's right. And if you look around the world, what do you see? That religion matters to global people. And
Absolutely.
We are been ineffective and untrained and uneducated in understanding them, haven't we?
Very much so. And it's much more basic than that in terms of globalization. Globalization is many things, but its effect ultimately is a siege upon identity.
Okay.
And we have this diffusion of ideas and technology, blah, 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 economics, and people are threatened. Where we work in Northwest Frontier Province in Pakistan, they don't want Madonna coming in on the cable network.
No.
And that's actually very true of conservatives here in this country. They don't want their kids being exposed to those types of things.
So the U.S. represents that. So when the U.S. is going to come in, they think, do we have to take all of the junk that they may perceive as junk with you? U.S.
is Western culture. U.S. is globalization. U.S. in many ways is Christian empire, which is a whole different issue. The Muslim world likes to see us with the Bible in one hand, or doesn't like to see us. They perceive us as the Bible in one hand, the sword in another. Christian hegemony coming at you live over satellite, soft power, but then also through hard power in places like Afghanistan and Iraq.
But they don't think that we're disengaged from religion. They don't really believe that we have a separation of church and state?
No, they do believe that, and I think that's part of our problem. Religion is politics in the Muslim world.
Right.
And when they hear things like democracy and secular separation of church and state, secular translates as godless.
Okay, and they don't want any part of that.
That's exactly right.
Because their identity is partly their religious faith.
Well, I would say it's all the religious faith.
Okay.
And when your identity is threatened and your traditions are threatened, you go to the anchor point, which is most meaningful to you and who you are as a person. And that often, at least in the developing world, is going to be religion. And in many ways, what you're seeing here is a clash not of civilizations, but between pre-modern and postmodern. Postmodern, we talk about it all the time, its impact on missiology, blah, blah, blah. Postmodern doesn't exist beyond NATO's borders, beyond the Western borders.
Okay.
In the rest of the world, pre-modern in the sense of a story matters. Religion is a story. It's a meta-narrative. It's explanatory. It's a framework for understanding how you engage the world, why things are right, why things are wrong. Right. In postmodernism, there's no story because all truth is relative.
Right.
And everybody's story counts. I'm okay, you're okay. Let's cooperate and graduate and blah, blah, blah.
So people with faith traditions, people with religious information and education are going to be a plus in these dialogues.
Well, they should be.
And they're not?
They're not to my, I have something I call the 90% irony rule. in America, at least 90% of people believe in something greater than themselves.
Right.
And much of that is a Christian tradition.
Right.
In the Muslim world, at least 90% believe in God.
Right.
But we're talking past each other. We
And why
can't
is that?
communicate because we're coming from this perspective of separation of church and state. Nobody is comfortable with talking about religion in terms of practical implications in realpolitik or in foreign policy. It's a very sensitive issue. So if you talk about God, well, hey, you're going to get attacked by ACLU and everybody else at the center and left of center. And that's been our tradition. But we have to be able to talk about God in terms of relating to the people who take God very seriously in parts of the developing world.
So the Institute for Global Engagement, which your father started and now which you head, started to create a public square for these kinds of conversations to happen.
That's exactly it. We're making it safe to talk about religion and politics. And
what obstacles did you come up? Were people suspicious?
Well, on all fronts. On all fronts. You know, on the home front, it's the separation of church and state, which therefore has to separate our analysis as well. So we started a thing called the Council on Faith and International Affairs to talk about religion and politics. We started originally just to demonstrate to the non-Christians out there that evangelicals can think and write with footnotes in an accessible way. Evangelicals, by the way, have a very negative stereotype in the world.
Right.
We're political, strident, and unforgiving, and
no nuance.
And yeah. We don't even know what the word nuance means. And so we're trying to demonstrate that we do have nuance, that we can write with footnotes, and we do know how to relate the very best of our faith and Scripture to the world in a practical and principled manner such that it has enduring effect and serves all of humanity, which, oh, by the way, is consistent with kingdom theology because we believe everyone, especially non-Christians, are made in the image of God.
You tell this story about how you were given a minder, a person who was not a Christian, knowing that you were a Christian. What happened? What was his impression? What did he think was going to happen, and what happened with you?
It was at the beginning of our engagement in Vietnam, where we've had some really neat, tangible success stories. But the beginning was was very inauspicious, and we were engaging the Vietnamese embassy. And we spent the day with them one day. We have a thing we call barbecue diplomacy, where they come out to our house in the countryside, away from the swarm.
More relaxed.
Sprawl and crawl of DC and ties and cufflinks. And we said, hey, we love your people. We want to serve your people. We're not going to embarrass you publicly, but we want to find a practical solution. We want to be a friend to the issue of religious freedom. We want to be a friend to the Vietnamese government transparently. This is who we are as Christians. This is why we work for religious freedom. And we want to be a friend of the U.S. government because we have access there as well. And at the end of the day, my handler, which is what all communist governments do, they assign somebody to watch you to make sure that you don't embarrass them in any form. Okay. He said, and this guy had been in the foreign service for 22 years. And he said, you're the first Americans we've talked to that didn't give us a list and tell us what to do. Wow.
Didn't give you a list and tell you what to do. Now that has a strike of arrogance to it, that we would be telling other people what to do.
Yeah.
And it presumes that we know what they need to do without
Look
listening.
Out. You need it, here we come. Ready, fire, aim.
Wow.
Or fire, ready, aim.
Right.
And it's a dangerous thing. I told that story on Capitol Hill back in October, and I had a bunch of staffers come up to me and say, that's all we ever do.
Right.
Give a list and tell people what to do. And that's not what we're called to do as Christians. We're called to listen and to understand and to contextualize the message. Contextual theology should be a redundant statement.
Right.
Our job is to go and love our neighbor in a language and logic they understand, as opposed to exposing them to the principles of the gospel principles as we understand them in the American cultural context.
In fact, it goes beyond tolerance and goes right into respect.
Absolutely. We like to say that it's tolerance is not enough. That's the official legal principle that's inculcated in all international covenants: tolerance, freedom of conscience, and of course. But if you just tolerate somebody, that just means, hey, I can allow for the fact that you're sitting next to me, and maybe I won't kill you.
Well, tolerance is like this: I'm going to put a distance between you and myself, and I'm not going to harm you. But that doesn't mean I love you. That doesn't mean I understand you. That doesn't mean that you and I have spent time listening, and that you know me and I know you.
And that we can agree to disagree on the things that are inevitable.
That's right.
And again, it comes back to a true kingdom theology. If I disagree with 99% of everything that you talk about,
Right.
you still have intrinsic and inherent dignity because you were made in the image of God.
Now, this has got to translate to people who have had immense suspicion of the United States. And one country in particular, in Pakistan, the Al-Qaeda, we hear about them, they're the enemy. But you've had an opportunity to actually go in and speak with Chief Minister Durrani and have some impact. What happened? Why did that happen?
Yeah, that's, I mean, this is a story only the author of Life could write, and if you didn't believe in God after you hear it, maybe,
maybe
you will.
Now, yes.
Yeah, we weren't planning on working in Pakistan. We were approached in the fall of 2003 by a Pakistani Christian from Reading, Pennsylvania, and he said, "We don't know what you do at the Institute for Global Engagement. We think you build bridges. How would you like to meet the Chief Minister of the Northwest Frontier Province of Pakistan? And oh, by the way, he's an Islamist. He was elected on an anti-American and pro-Sharia platform. Sharia being Islamic law, and no separation of church and state or mosque and state." And my first reaction was, yeah, right, I'd love to do that. And oh, by the way, are you kidding me? I'm not going over there in that context where there's no assurance of our safety or whatever.
Right.
But you get to thinking.
What an opportunity.
Well, but even more basic than that, we talked about all these things, and if my faith isn't real in the most difficult places, if it isn't relevant in a practical manner, then why should I dare to believe it in the comfortableness of my Christian kumbaya cocoon in suburban America?
Right.
It's got to be real there. So
you're willing to test it?
I was willing to test it, and the way it all worked out was that we invited the Chief Minister to America. We spent 10 days, we brought his family, we showed honor.
But why was he willing to come?
Well, that's the thing. Most people say, why would you talk to an Islamist? And we got beaten up in the press by the New York Times and neocons.
Harboring the enemy.
Yeah, why, these are bloodthirsty bigots. That's what all the neocons said. Don't let him go return. Seize him now.
Yeah, right.
And then the New York Times said, basically, we were just like them because we didn't see any separation of church and state because we believe God is sovereign in all spheres.
Right, and so now we're going to bring that to America, right? We worry, worry, worry.
Yeah, and what we like to say is, hey, look, we're in the radical middle. We're between the leftover left and the self-righteous right. We don't have time for either of you guys. We're going to be real with the principles that Christ has taught us.
The radical middle.
From John 4, the woman at the well. How dare you, Jesus, engage the double minority, the Samaritan who's a woman who's theologically and ethnically despised. But there's Jesus talking to her, speaking truth in love, Ephesians 4, but finding practical ways to serve that entire community by giving real water and then spiritual water.
And a radical engagement.
And that's why we had Chief Minister Durrani over. We gave him the full-on treatment. Try telling a Christian donor, hey, we're bringing an Islamist over, and part of honoring him and showing him respect and dignity is we're going to put him up at the Fairmont and give him his whole suite up at their top floor. No Christian donor would touch it. We had a secular donor come alongside us and support us because he believes so much in these principles.
Wow. What a neat coming together of that, too.
Well, yeah. It gets, again, the principles of Christ. They're not touchy-feely lip service thing. If you dare to live them, they're practical. So my first meeting with the Chief Minister at the Fairmont Hotel in Washington, I said, hey, we don't know each other. This is our first meeting. I need to know why you're in this business. Why are you in politics?
Right.
And his response to me is something I'll never forget. He said, through a translator, he said, I think that I will stand before God on Judgment Day and be held accountable for how I steward my political power and how I live my life.
As a Christian, you resonated with that 100%.
I said, we disagree on some things theologically, but we have this in common. Let's see what we can do together.
What a sacred moment.
Oh, it was very special. Wow. I get goosebumps thinking about it now.
It raises tears to my eyes when I think about that kind of understanding that's possible with the group we think of as the enemy.
Yeah, and these guys know and have sent their students, their seminary students, mosque or madrasa students into Taliban, and some of them have been into Al-Qaeda. Before the Chief Minister came to America for the first time, his first experience outside the Muslim world, he had been quoted in the press as saying 9/11 was the Jews and the CIA.
Wow.
I took him to ground zero. We spent a whole 10 days together just talking about things. We took him to a retreat center. What does it mean to be a follower of God? How do we think about these things? What are the things we have in common? We believe in the sovereignty of God, justice, peace. How do we work for those things as brothers and sisters in humanity of the Abrahamic tradition, as people of the book, Al-Kitab, as they say in Arabic? And a relationship starts. And once you have a relationship,
That's right.
Now you're in a different game because now you're not dealing with stereotypes.
Right.
And he invited us back to Pakistan, and that's how it began.
And then you knew that you had a relationship, you had your safety, you had the opportunity to have conversations. What has changed in Pakistan, in his region, because of your relationships?
Well, there's not a whole lot of good coming from all Pakistan, as we know,
it's very tough right
since
now.
the Bhutto assassination. But there are a number of positive things that are taking place, and just two practical things. You know, you don't think that one person can't make a difference.
It's a big problem. It
is a big problem, but this is how we're making a difference. Okay. Because of that relationship, for example, we in December of 2006, and this is through other sources, namely the Christian Bishop of Northwest Frontier Province. This is him speaking here. Because of our efforts and our relationship with the Chief Minister Durrani, Chief Minister Durrani went and laid the cornerstone of a Christian church at Peshawar University.
Wow.
In Pakistan, it's illegal to build a church.
And yet their chief minister was?
Who is an Islamist from an Islamist political coalition of 6 Islamist parties seeking to, according to their platform, impose Sharia law, went to a state university and said, the church had fallen in disrepair, said, we're going to refurbish this church, I'm going to lay the cornerstone, I'm going to do it publicly, and I'm going to put $50,000 of government money toward it.
Was his life at risk? What kind of negative press, if they have such a thing there, occurred?
Well, sure, there's negative press, but the press said, and the court said, the Sharia courts upheld it. Wow. And the reason they upheld it was simply because if the chief minister from a Sharia-based party says it's okay, then it's okay.
Okay, so it matters when people like the chief minister are going to act in a particular way.
He had seen a different example of Americans.
Wow.
And again, his feeling, I don't want to stereotype all Pashtuns, right, but their general feeling about Americans is you have the Bible in one hand and the sword in another, and you don't care to know who we are and love us. And they also know that we abandoned them.
We abandoned them. Explain that.
Well, go back to the Afghanistan war when the Soviets invaded.
Right.
And we came alongside and funded the Mujahideen, Islamic fighters trying to throw atheistic Soviets out of Afghanistan. Right. As soon as that war was over, between 1989 and 1992, we withdrew all of our support. And what was the result? There were 6 million Afghan refugees in Peshawar alone, the capital of the Northwest Frontier Province, overwhelmed their social and health networks.
Right, and then we didn't do anything for them.
See ya.
Right. And so this is a lasting impression about misery that was caused and not helped by the United States.
This is America. When we serve your self-interest, you're happy to use us. You're going to help us fight and kill your enemy, but what are you going to do to support our people?